Can you talk about how to distinguish between what is necessary and unnecessary?
Yes. What is the distinction, which is also really interesting because it leads you to another very, very important discovery, which is knowing whether you've made the right or wrong decision, because understanding there is no right and wrong. We've talked about that in a different tutorial, right? Yeah. But understanding that there is no right and wrong leaves you with the question of, well, then how do I navigate my life if I can't make a decision based on right and wrong? Then I'm stuck with making a decision based on what? Right. And that's where we use the tool of necessary versus unnecessary. Necessary versus unnecessary leads us to a very interesting outcome. And the outcome is not whether something ended up being right or wrong, but whether the problem stopped or continued.
Right.
And this is a huge distinction that people need to understand how to make, because it's the first thing that happens when I tell people there's no right and wrong, that there's no good and bad. There's a short circuit because they're like, well, I really don't know how I'm going to navigate through the world now, considering most of my day-to-day decisions are made off what I think is going to be right and what I think is going to be wrong, ethically, morally, socially. So what's interesting about the tool of necessary versus unnecessary is that instead of placing a value judgment on the outcome, or even placing a value judgment on the circumstances, I instead evaluate what the effect of my decision was. So if the effect of my decision was that the problem stopped or the problem worsened, I get to then decide if what I did was necessary or unnecessary, because if I did too much, the problem continues. If I don't do enough, the problem continues. So let's say that you've got a baby and your child is crying, and you hold the baby and you rock the baby, and the baby continues to cry. You feed the baby doesn't want the food, the baby continues to cry. You entertain the baby, you talk to the baby, you smile, you play with the baby continues to cry. Then you check the baby's diaper and you realize that the baby's diaper needs to be changed, the baby's uncomfortable. And you change the diaper and the baby stops crying. And you think about all the unnecessary things you did to reach that moment when, obviously a certain amount of experience, like when a mother has connection with their child and they understand, they oftentimes can even tell by the baby's cry. Their diaper needs to be changed.
The look on their face.
They're hungry. They don't go through this 4-step process of what's possibly unnecessary necessary to get to the solution. But they didn't do the wrong thing. The 3 things they did before getting to the 4th, they weren't wrong. It wasn't wrong to try to feed the baby. It wasn't wrong to try to, soothe the baby, but it wasn't necessary. And so in life, it's about gathering experience and wisdom so that you can more quickly get to what's necessary. And you can through skill and precision and experience, you can avoid what is unnecessary. And that is such a powerful tool. And that tool is developed through time and mistakes and effort. And that's why when you go to someone as an example, let's say you injure yourself. When you go to a really skilled surgeon, you don't want them to try 4 different things.
No, of course not.
Right, to get to solving the problem. But that's how it started.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are during the history of particular technology, you're either, as we would frame it, you're either a guinea pig, or you're at the right time at the, you're on the perfect end of that technology. You're right where you wish that you would be.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, surgery couldn't be better right now for, say, orthoscopic. They go in, they don't even, you go in and with a laser, and then they can have your knee repaired. You walk out the same day.
Right. Yeah.
This was the kind of injury that, in the history of humans, this might have actually been, you may have never walked again.
Right.
Which then may have resulted in you not being able to work or feed yourself, and it literally may have resulted in your death.
Yeah.
And now it's just a literal in and out, procedure compared to a life-threatening, condition. So, necessary versus unnecessary is something that's been with us for a very long time. Science has been using it for a very long time. Engineering, like critical thinking, it's part of critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
You understand?
Yeah.
You're solving a problem critically. Working, trying things out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, taking facts as they come. Disposing of things that aren't working. It's a very critical process. Necessary versus unnecessary.
Yeah.
It is not good and bad.
Yeah.
Which is very superficial, and again works more within the realm of superstition and mythology. It's in that realm of the saints and sinners, good and bad, evil versus
Right.
It's
There's a lot of fear and.
Well, but exactly, it's not based on fact. It's again based on belief that has been driven by opinion and emotion.
Emotions, right? Which could really help the decision-making process for those that are very indecisive about the next moves to make in their life. They're usually what's right and wrong, what's good and bad are weighed out before what's necessary and what's unnecessary. So it could really help you maneuver along a path.
And by the way, I was going to say, if you were taught to believe that it is wrong for a woman to drive a car in public, let's just talk Saudi Arabia, 20 years ago, I'm a female, we're not allowed to drive. Or if I'm a female and I'm in a car with a male that's not my father or my husband or my brother, I literally am going to jail. Because that is not appropriate behavior. It is wrong. When you have been taught to see the world in that way, because again, there's no evidence for that. There is zero evidence that it is wrong for a female to be in a car with a male she's not related to. It is the product of belief. It's the product of emotion. It's the product of mythology. It's not the product of science and critical thought. Because when you start critically analyzing it, you realize there's really no reason that a woman can't be in a car with a person she's not related to, other than it not matching some other person's version of reality and ethics.
Those would just be unnecessary boundaries.
It's a boundary someone created to serve a purpose.
Right.
And that purpose is usually their own preferences, their own beliefs, their own personal value system, their own personal ethic. So, but it doesn't serve the real and true safety or, there are things you can measure that really do serve the safety of the public, like red lights. You can truly say a red light serves the public's safety. And if we all stop at them, we don't run through the intersection and ram into each other, killing one another all the time. So there are certain things there are rules and agreements that we make that actually do serve the greater good. And then there are rules and agreements that we make that serve someone's agenda, someone's personal preferences based on their personal ethics and beliefs. So what is necessary versus unnecessary, this kind of thinking is in the toolbox of the scientist.
Yeah.
It is not necessarily in the toolbox of a person who buys heavily into mythology or into mysticism. It's really in the toolbox of a philosopher, of a scientist, of even an artist who's in pursuit of truth. And scientists and artists and philosophers are notoriously in pursuit of truth. Artists being the less invested in that concept. Scientists being the most, philosophers being somewhere alongside that, and then artists being somewhere in that realm. But they're not necessarily always in the pursuit of truth. They're oftentimes in the pursuit of what is in service to their own personal feelings, and art is very self-serving, and no question, and all things are. But oftentimes science is in the service of man, and art can be as well, but it's oftentimes art is in the service of self because it's something you produce for self-satisfaction. It brings you a sense of self joy or accomplishment when you create art, and other people love it and celebrate it. Okay, very few artists create art and don't share it with someone, but some people do, and that artist is someone who can do that and be very satisfied by just producing it for themselves, and just that person is obviously working a little closer to a pure state if they don't need to be seen.
Sure, yeah.
But necessary versus unnecessary is a tool that we must use if we're going to be able to solve problems on a day-to-day basis, not through mysticism, not through mythology, but through causality. I need to understand that because I did this, it created that. And if I want to replicate that over and over again, I need a consistent pattern of behavior. So if I want to create trust in the lives of the people around me, I want to create trust in all of my relationships, right? I want to have relationships where if you ask 10 people about me and you ask 10 people if they can trust me, I ask 10 different people, do you feel you can trust me? And all 10 people say, yes, I feel that you're trustable. There's something I'm doing consistently to produce that. And if 10 people say they don't feel they could trust me, or 9 or 8 or 7 say they don't feel they can trust me, there's something I'm doing that is consistent to create that outcome. People don't trust me because, at cause, I oftentimes am not my word. So it's very simple if you want to get away from good and bad, right and wrong, and you get into necessary versus unnecessary. If I want to create trust, I need to do what is necessary to build trust. And necessary means being my word. Versus if I don't do what is necessary, it is very difficult for me to produce a consistent outcome of trust. Does that feel clear for you?
That feels clear, yes.
Excellent. So this is a good wrap up and a good way for us to sort of it's a good way to start a very basic, personal, day-to-day growth strategy, which is starting with basic tools, like necessary versus unnecessary. It's a tool. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to be a critical thinker, and we're going to use tools within the critical thought process. And one of those tools is doing what is necessary versus doing what is unnecessary, rather than doing what is right versus doing what is wrong. And we're going to evaluate whether we're doing what is necessary versus unnecessary with whether the outcome was a solution.
Mm-hmm.
That the problem is solved.
Problem solved.
And that I have built integrity. I have created integrity around whatever problem I was trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So if the building, if that pillar over there is starting to collapse, and I go over there and I do what is necessary to reestablish the integrity of that pillar. Mm-hmm. If I reinforce it with the right materials, and I do the right, the right engineering is applied, and I can demonstrate I've done what is necessary, then I've solved the problem. Mm-hmm. The building collapses because I was lazy. I didn't believe in science. Mm-hmm. I didn't care what the facts were on the durability of that particular material. I didn't care. Yeah. I knew it. It was said. I was told it was questionable, but I believed in my opinions, and I made a decision. I basically did what was unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And that resulted in the collapse of the building, which could have then resulted in the death of people or the destruction of something important to me or others. And that is why necessary versus unnecessary is such an important tool.